I never imagined that a single night could change everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and myself. But then again, I never expected to find myself in a situation where the lines between right and wrong became so blurred that I could hardly tell them apart. It all started with a simple invitation to dinner, an evening that should have been nothing more than a casual gathering of friends. But it was there, in the warm glow of candlelight and laughter, that my life began to unravel in ways I couldn't have predicted. Isabella had been my best friend for as long as I could remember. We grew up together, shared secrets and dreams, and supported each other through every milestone. When she met Ethan, I was thrilled for her. He was charming, intelligent, and they seemed perfect for each other. Their relationship blossomed quickly, and soon they were inseparable. I was happy for them, truly, I was. But as time went on, I couldn't help but notice a growing sense of unease deep within me, a feeling I tried to ignore but couldn't completely shake. Ethan was everything Isabella deserved, kind, thoughtful, and completely devoted to her. But there was something about him that unsettled me, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. I chalked it up to jealousy. After all, Isabella and I had always been so close, and now there was someone else taking up so much of her time and attention. I told myself that it was normal to feel a little left out, that it would pass. But it didn't. The night of the dinner, Isabella had invited a small group of us over to her apartment. It was a cozy place, filled with the warmth of her personality, bookshelves overflowing with novels, art prints she'd collected over the years, and the soft, inviting glow of fairy lights strung across the walls. Ethan had offered to cook, and we all gathered around the table, the smell of garlic and herbs filling the air as he prepared the meal. It was supposed to be a relaxing evening, a chance to unwind and catch up with friends. But from the moment I walked through the door, I felt a strange tension in the air, an undercurrent of something unspoken. As we sat down to eat, I found myself stealing glances at Ethan, watching the way he moved, the way he interacted with everyone around the table. He was charming, as always, effortlessly drawing people in with his wit and easygoing nature. But every time our eyes met, I felt a jolt of something I couldn't quite name, something that made my heart race and my stomach twist in knots. After dinner, we moved to the living room, where Isabella had set up a makeshift bar with an assortment of drinks. Ethan handed me a glass of wine, our fingers brushing as he did. The contact sent a shiver down my spine, and I quickly looked away, trying to steady my breathing. What was wrong with me? This was Ethan, Isabella's Ethan. I had no right to feel anything for him, no right to let my mind wander to places it shouldn't go. But the more I tried to push the thoughts away, the more they consumed me. Every time he laughed, every time he smiled, I felt a pang of longing, a desire that I knew was completely wrong but couldn't seem to control. I was playing with fire, and I knew it. But I couldn't stop myself from getting closer, from wanting more. As the night wore on, the others began to drift away, heading home with promises to meet up again soon. Eventually, it was just the three of us, Isabella, Ethan, and me, sitting together on the couch, the conversation growing quieter, more intimate as the hour grew late. Isabella was curled up against Ethan, her head resting on his shoulder, her eyes half closed with contentment. I tried to focus on the conversation, to keep my thoughts in check, but it was becoming increasingly difficult. "I think I'm going to head to bed," Isabella said finally, her voice soft and sleepy. "It's been a long day." Ethan smiled down at her, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. "Of course, love. You should get some rest." Isabella stood, stretching as she did, and then turned to me. "You're welcome to stay the night if you want, Anna. There's no need to rush home." I forced a smile, nodding. "Thanks, Isa. I might just take you up on that." She hugged me goodnight, and then disappeared down the hallway, leaving Ethan and me alone in the dimly lit living room. The silence that followed was thick, charged with something I didn't want to acknowledge, but couldn't ignore. Ethan leaned back on the couch, his eyes on me, a small smile playing on his lips. "You know, Isabella's really lucky to have a friend like you," he said, his voice low and sincere. I felt a flush of warmth at his words, but it was tinged with guilt. "I'm the lucky one," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. She's always been there for me, through everything. He nodded, his gaze never leaving mine. You've been through a lot together, haven't you? I nodded, unable to look away. Yeah, we have. She's like a sister to me. Ethan was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. I can see why she values your friendship so much. You're a special person, Anna. His words caught me off guard, and I felt my heart skip a beat. Thank you, I said softly, unsure of what else to say. He shifted closer to me on the couch, his knee brushing against mine. The contact was electric, sending a shockwave through my body. I mean it, he said, his voice even softer now. There's something about you, something that draws people in. I felt it the first time we met. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt a surge of panic. This was wrong, so wrong. I shouldn't be here, shouldn't be alone with him, shouldn't be letting this happen. But I couldn't bring myself to move, couldn't tear my eyes away from his. Ethan, I began, my voice trembling. He reached out, gently placing a hand on my arm, his touch warm and steady. Anna, I know this is complicated, he said, his voice low and earnest. I know that this isn't supposed to happen. But I can't ignore what I'm feeling, and I don't think you can either. My heart was pounding in my chest, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts and emotions. He was right, I couldn't ignore it. The attraction between us was undeniable, overwhelming. But what about Isabella? What about the years of friendship, the trust she had in me? How could I betray her like this? I can't, I whispered, my voice barely audible. Ethan's expression softened, and he moved closer, his hand sliding down my arm to take my hand in his. Anna, I don't want to hurt Isabella. I care about her deeply. But there's something between us, something real. I know you feel it too. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I tried to pull my hand away, but he held on gently, his thumb brushing over my knuckles in a soothing gesture. Ethan, this is wrong. We can't do this. I can't betray her like this. He was silent for a moment, his gaze intense, as if he was searching for the right words. I know, he said finally, his voice filled with a mixture of regret and longing. But what if this is something we're meant to explore? What if we're denying something that could be beautiful? His words hit me like a punch to the gut, and I felt a wave of guilt and confusion wash over me. How could I even consider this? How could I let myself be swayed by his words, by the undeniable chemistry between us? But as much as I wanted to push him away, to run from the temptation, I couldn't. I was drawn to him, inexplicably and irresistibly. Before I could think it through, before I could talk myself out of it, I leaned in, closing the distance between us. Our lips met in a soft, tentative kiss, and the moment they did, all my doubts, all my guilt, seemed to melt away. It was like nothing I'd ever felt before, intense, overwhelming, and completely consuming. Ethan responded immediately, his hand coming up to cup my cheek as he deepened the kiss. My heart was racing, my body trembling with a mixture of fear and desire. This was wrong, so wrong, but I couldn't stop myself. I was lost in him, in the way he made me feel, in the forbidden thrill of it all. We pulled apart, both of us breathless, our foreheads resting together as we tried to catch our breath. Anna, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Are you sure about this? I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure about anything anymore. But in that moment, all I could think about was how much I wanted him, how much I needed to feel something real, something intense, something that made me forget about everything else. Yes, I whispered, my voice trembling. I'm sure. He kissed me again, and this time there was no hesitation, no holding back. It was as if all the emotions we'd been keeping at bay, all the tension that had been building between us, came rushing out in that one kiss. His hands roamed over my body, pulling over me as I melted into his touch, feeling a whirlwind of emotions, desire, guilt, fear, all tangled together in a confusing mess that I couldn't begin to sort out. His hands roamed over my body, pulling me closer, and I found myself responding instinctively, my own hands exploring the solid lines of his back, his shoulders, as if this was something I'd been longing to do for far longer than I realized. Time seemed to stop as we lost ourselves in the intensity of the moment. Every rational thought, every reason to stop, was drowned out by the overwhelming need that pulsed between us. It was reckless, dangerous, and utterly intoxicating. As we stumbled back onto the couch, the world outside ceased to exist. All that mattered was the heat of his body against mine, the way our breaths mingled, the way our hearts seemed to beat in sync as we crossed a line that neither of us could ever uncross. Somewhere in the back of my mind, a small voice tried to break through the haze, reminding me of Isabella, of the friendship I was betraying, of the consequences that would inevitably follow. But that voice was drowned out by the rush of adrenaline, the thrill of doing something so utterly forbidden that it felt like we were the only two people in the world who existed in that moment. We eventually found ourselves in his arms, lying on the couch, our bodies intertwined in a way that felt both familiar and completely new. I rested my head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart as my own heart pounded with a mix of emotions I couldn't even begin to untangle. I knew this was wrong. I knew that what we had done could never be justified, no matter how intense the attraction between us had been. But in that moment, lying there with him, I couldn't bring myself to care. Ethan's hand gently stroked my hair, his touch soothing in a way that made my heart ache. "Anna," he murmured, his voice soft and filled with a vulnerability I hadn't expected. "What happens now?" His question brought me crashing back to reality, the weight of what we had done settling heavily on my chest. What did happen now? How could we possibly move forward from this, knowing what we had done, knowing the pain it would cause? I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that the consequences of our actions would be far-reaching and devastating. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what to do, Ethan. This changes everything." He sighed, his breath ruffling my hair as he pulled me closer. "I wish I could say it doesn't," he said softly, "but I know it does. I care about you, Anna. More than I should, more than I ever expected to. But I also care about Isabella. I never wanted to hurt her." His words mirrored my own thoughts, and I felt a fresh wave of guilt wash over me. How could we have done this? How could we have let things get so out of control? But the truth was, I knew exactly how it had happened. The attraction between us had been building for months, simmering just beneath the surface, until it finally boiled over in a moment of weakness. "We have to tell her," I said, my voice trembling with the weight of the decision. "She deserves to know the truth, no matter how much it hurts." Ethan was silent for a long moment, his hand stilling in my hair as he considered my words. "I know you're right," he said finally, his voice heavy with resignation. "But it's going to destroy her. She trusts us, both of us. How do we tell her that we betrayed her like this?" The thought of Isabella's reaction, of the pain we were about to cause her, made my stomach turn. She had always been there for me, through everything. She trusted me, confided in me, believed in our friendship in a way that made this betrayal all the more devastating. And now, I was about to shatter that trust, to ruin everything we had built together over the years. But as much as I hated the thought of hurting her, I knew that keeping this a secret would be even worse. It would eat away at me, at Ethan, at our relationship with Isabella, until there was nothing left but lies and deceit. We couldn't keep this hidden, no matter how much we wanted to. "We have to tell her," I repeated, my voice firmer this time. "We owe it to her to be honest, no matter what happens." Ethan nodded, though I could see the fear in his eyes, the same fear that was gnawing at my insides. "You're right," he said quietly. "But we have to do it together. She deserves to hear it from both of us." I agreed, though the thought of facing Isabella together, of seeing the hurt and betrayal in her eyes, made my heart clench with dread. But there was no other way. We had made this mess together, and we would face the consequences together. The next morning, as the sun began to rise, casting a pale light over the city, we made our way to Isabella's room. My heart was pounding in my chest, my hands trembling as I knocked softly on her door. Ethan stood beside me, his face pale, his jaw clenched with determination. "Come in," Isabella's voice called from the other side of the door, still thick with sleep. We exchanged a glance, both of us steeling ourselves for what was about to happen, and then I pushed the door open. Isabella was sitting up in bed, her hair tousled, her eyes still heavy with sleep. She smiled when she saw us, her face lighting up with the same warmth and affection that had always been a part of our friendship. "Morning," she said, her voice soft and welcoming. "What's going on?" My throat tightened, and for a moment, I couldn't speak. How could I possibly explain what we had done? How could I put into words the betrayal, the hurt, the devastation that we were about to unleash on her? But before I could find the words, Ethan stepped forward, his expression filled with a mix of regret and determination. "Isabella, we need to talk," he said, his voice steady but strained. "There's something we need to tell you. Something you deserve to know." Isabella's smile faltered, and she looked between us, her brow furrowing in confusion. "What's going on?" she asked again, her voice tinged with worry now. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest as I forced the words out. I don't even know how to say this," I began, my voice trembling. "But something happened last night, between me and Ethan. And it wasn't just a mistake. It was something more." Her eyes widened in shock, and for a moment, she just stared at us, as if she couldn't quite process what we were saying. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan stepped closer, his expression filled with guilt and sorrow. "I'm so sorry, Isabella," he said softly. "But Anna and we kissed. And it wasn't just a kiss. It was more than that. We've been feeling something for each other for a while now, and last night, it all came to a head." Isabella's face went pale, and she shook her head in disbelief. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling. "No, this can't be happening. You're my best friend, Anna. And Ethan, you're everything to me. How could you do this?" Tears welled up in my eyes, and I reached out to her, desperate to somehow make this right, to somehow ease the pain we were causing her. "I'm so sorry, I said, my voice breaking. "I never wanted to hurt you. But I couldn't stop myself. And I hate myself for it." But she pulled away from my touch, her eyes filled with a mixture of hurt, anger, and betrayal. "How could you do this?" she demanded, her voice rising with each word. "How could you betray me like this? Both of you?" Ethan tried to step closer, but she backed away, her hands trembling as she held them up as if to ward us off. "Don't," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "Just don't. I can't even look at you right now." My heart shattered as I saw the tears streaming down her face, knowing that I was the cause of her pain, that I had destroyed everything we had built together. "Isabella, please," I begged, my voice trembling. "Please, let us explain." But she shook her head, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and despair. "There's nothing to explain," she said coldly. "You've both made your choices. And now, I have to make mine." With that, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving Ethan and me standing there, the weight of our betrayal crushing us both. I wanted to chase after her, to beg for her forgiveness, to somehow make her understand that I never meant to hurt her. But I knew that it was too late. The damage had been done, and there was no going back. Ethan and I stood there in silence for what felt like an eternity, the reality of what we had done sinking in with every passing second. We had destroyed something beautiful, something precious, and we could never undo it. The bond between Isabella and me had been shattered, the trust that had taken years to build had been broken in a single night. Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "What have we done?" I shook my head, tears streaming down my face as I tried to find the words to answer him. But there was nothing I could say that would make this right, nothing that would undo the pain we had caused. "I don't know," I whispered, my voice trembling with the weight of my guilt. "I don't know how we move on from this." Ethan looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of regret and sorrow. "I never wanted this to happen," he said softly. "I never wanted to hurt her. And I never wanted to hurt you. But the truth was, we had hurt each other, and we had hurt Isabella in the process. And now, we were left to pick up the pieces of the lives we had shattered. As the days turned into weeks, the rift between Isabella and me only grew wider. She avoided me, refused to answer my calls, and when we did see each other, the pain in her eyes was almost too much to bear. I tried to reach out, tried to apologize, tried to explain, but nothing I said could make up for the betrayal she had endured. And as for Ethan, the connection we had once shared, the intense chemistry that had drawn us together, was now tainted by the guilt and regret that consumed us both. We tried to salvage something from the wreckage, tried to find a way to move forward together, but the weight of what we had done was too heavy to bear. One evening, as we sat in a small cafe, sipping coffee in silence, Ethan finally spoke, his voice filled with resignation. "This isn't working, is it?" I looked up at him, my heart aching with the truth of his words. "No," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's not." He sighed, running a hand through his hair as he leaned back in his chair. "I care about you, Anna. But this isn't what I thought it would be. The guilt, the pain, it's too much. And I don't think I can keep doing this." His words hit me like a ton of bricks, and I felt tears welling up in my eyes. "I know," I said softly, my voice trembling. "I know it's too much. I can't keep doing this either." We sat there in silence for a long moment, both of us coming to terms with the reality of what we had done, of the lives we had ruined in the process. And finally, we both knew that the only way forward was to let go, to try to find some semblance of peace, even if it meant going our separate ways. "I'm sorry," Ethan said quietly, his voice filled with regret. "I'm sorry for everything." "I'm sorry too," I replied, my voice breaking as the tears began to fall. "For everything." And with that, we both knew it was over. The intense, all-consuming passion that had once drawn us together was now nothing more than a painful memory, a reminder of the mistakes we had made, and the people we had hurt. As we walked out of the cafe, each of us going our separate ways, I couldn't help but wonder if we would ever find a way to heal, to move on from the pain we had caused. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, I slowly began to realize that some wounds are too deep to ever fully heal. And as for Isabella, the friend I had once cherished more than anything, our friendship was shattered beyond repair. The trust we had once shared, the bond that had held us together for so many years, was gone, replaced by a painful silence that spoke louder than any words ever could. In the end, I was left with nothing but the echoes of the choices I had made, the decisions that had led me down a path I could never return from. And as I moved forward with my life, I knew that I would carry the weight of that betrayal with me always, a constant reminder of the consequences of my actions, and the lives I had destroyed along the way.